Order, order. We start with questions to the Minister for the Cabinet Office, Christian Wakeford.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to answer questions 1, 2 and 9 together. The Prime Minister is responsible for the Ministerial Code and is the ultimate judge of the standards of behaviour expected of ministers set out in that code. All ministers are expected to uphold the principles of the code, as the Prime Minister has made clear.
Christian Wakeford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the 19th of April, Akoba wrote to the Deputy Prime Minister to report a breach of the rules by the former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, in relation to a visit to Venezuela to meet with President Maduro on behalf of the hedge fund Merlin Advisors. Was the Cabinet Office aware of this visit in advance, and did the Secretary of State or officials have a conversation with the Foreign Office about any tax-funded briefings he may have received?
So, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. The Government expects all former ministers and Prime Ministers to abide by their obligations with regard to the business appointment rules set out in the Ministerial Code. The Cabinet Office is currently considering a letter on this matter from the Advisory Committee on Business Appointments and will respond in due course.
Rupa. Dr. Rupa.
There's Boris Johnson's hedge fund lobbying in Venezuela. There's also his Daily Mail column, and then the letters PM After's contravention of the Radcliffe rules for betraying royal confidences in her book. He said that the Prime Minister is judge and jury of this code. Isn't it time for a more independent system, such as the proposed Ethics and Integrity Commission of the Labour Party? If they won't do that, can't they just call a general election now?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. The 7 principles on public life are very clear. I set out what the Prime Minister's expectations are, but I would just draw her attention to the Committee on Standards in Public Life and what they said in 2021, when they said a single commission would come with considerable disadvantages, and a concentration of such power to a body does not sit well in our democratic system.
Sir Christopher Bryant.
Well, it's fascinating to see 4 times as many ministers as there are backbench members of the Conservative Party here today. But the Ministerial Code says in 1.3d, ministers should be as open as possible with Parliament and the public. And at 1.3f, ministers must ensure that no conflict arises or appears to arise. So why is it that the Government is still refusing to publish the details of the Foreign Secretary's financial interests from before he was appointed to the House of Lords? Why is the Government still refusing, despite numerous requests from newspapers and others, to publish whether or not the Foreign Secretary has had to recuse himself from certain elements of his job because of his previous involvement with the Chinese state? And why is the Government point-blank refusing to say which parts of his job he is recused from?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his questions. The independent adviser on ministerial interests last published on the 14th of December 2023, following publication previously on the 17th of July, which updated what he'd done on the 19th of April. The process of ministerial engagement with the Register is an ongoing one, where it's updated on an ongoing basis, and individual ministers, when they are first appointed, when ministers are appointed, they fill out an extensive form which their permanent secretary then reviews, and there is a continuous process of updating that as interests evolve.
We now come to Shadow Secretary Nick Thomas-Symonds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In a letter to me, the Deputy Prime Minister said of Mr Johnson's recent trip to Venezuela that he was not acting on behalf of the government and the trip was not funded by the government. In a written parliamentary answer to me, we were told Mr Johnson had only made a courtesy call to the British residents. Yet last week, the chair of ACABA made clear that Mr Johnson was in breach of the government's business appointment rules, and we also know from Mr Johnson himself that he had, and I quote, been extensively briefed by the embassy. When is the government actually going to come clean for what has actually gone on with Boris Johnson's Venezuela visit?
Well, I set out in a previous answer where we are in terms of the Cabinet Office considering the letter from Akoba. We do expect all ministers, civil servants, special advisers to abide by those business appointment rules. They are contractual requirements for civil servants and are drawn to the attention of ministers via the Ministerial Code. And as was announced in the Government's response last July to the reports from the Committee on Standards in Public Life, Mr Boardman's review and PACAC, we are continuing to consider methods to strengthen the system and encourage compliance with those rules. But with respect to the specific case, I said that the Cabinet Office is due to respond to that letter.
Wakeford. Number 3, please, Mr Speaker.
With your permission, Mr Speaker, I would like to answer questions 3 and 8 together. The cyber threat facing the United Kingdom is intensifying. State and non-state actors have targeted our CNI, our businesses and even our democratic institutions. The Government has introduced a new national cyber strategy which takes a whole-of-society approach. We have set out high standards of cyber protection for our critical industries, and with the help of our world-leading agencies, we are offering advice to institutions, businesses and individuals to protect themselves online.
Smith. Mr Speaker, cybersecurity is not only crucial to our defence sector, but others including finance, energy and retail. So after speaking to sector leaders, they raise fears to me around the future supply of cyber professionals. There's some brilliant work taking place in the Evervale College in my constituency, pioneering stuff going on around cyber security. But can the Deputy Prime Minister say what's being done to onshore these critical roles to protect our economy from attacks by hostile actors?
Well, the Honourable Gentleman is absolutely right to raise this issue. We actually have tremendous strengths in national cyber security, and if you go to many institutions around the country, I visited universities in Wales, where they're churning out brilliant graduates. We do need to do more at the secondary level to encourage more children to get involved in it, because the demand is only going to increase in the months and years ahead, and I've been engaging with the Education Secretary on precisely this point.
John Cryer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. We've all seen in recent weeks how weak cybersecurity can compromise elected representatives and lead to the extraction of often compromising information as well. Could the Minister update the House on what he's doing to provide support and technology specifically to elected representatives to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future?
Well, this is an important issue. This is why we established the National Cyber Security Centre. The National Cyber Security Centre brings together GCHQ expertise with those of the Cabinet Office, Foreign Office and others. And through the National Cyber Security Centre, we work with house authorities and others to make sure that they have both sufficient and appropriate advice, but also to advise on equipment and general security of Members of Parliament. If Members of Parliament have concerns about their cybersecurity, I would urge them to get in contact either directly with the National Cyber Security Centre or through the relevant house authorities.
Minister Jonathan Ashworth.
Grateful, Mr Speaker. He rightly says that the threat is intensifying, and I think late last year the Joint Committee on National Security Strategy urged the Government to offer more active support on cybersecurity to local authorities. He may be aware that my own local authority in Leicester, Leicester City Council, last month suffered a hugely sophisticated attack which disrupted services and has hugely inconvenienced many of my constituents who rely on many of those local authority services. Given that we're seeing more of these ransomware group attacks on public institutions across the world, and given he quite rightly says this threat is intensifying, what urgent support and guidance is he offering local councils such as mine in Leicester?
Well, specifically in relation to his local authority, I have been briefed by the National Cyber Security Centre on that incident, and he's totally right. It is a significant and serious incident, and we're working through the National Cyber Security Centre on remediation. In terms of preventing this from happening in the first place, that's exactly why we invested £2.6 billion in the National Cyber Strategy, which is about improving cyber resilience and reducing legacy technology. I've been quite open with the House that the threat is intensifying because what we see is hostile states in particular creating environments in which these cyber criminals can flourish both for their own benefit and for the benefit of those hostile states. So we are working both through our intelligence agencies but also through the National Cyber Security Centre to continuously improve our performance.
Question number 4, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Protecting national security is the government's first duty. On Tuesday, the Prime Minister announced a fully funded plan to increase our defence spending by £75 billion over the next 6 years. As part of this uplift, we will bring forward a national defence and resilience plan, building on the resilience framework and integrated review to respond to the evolving threats we face, bringing our defence and civilian preparations together to reflect the interconnectedness of those threats. The Cabinet Office itself plays a central role in this, coordinating strategy through COBRA and resilience directorates and the National Security Council.
Mike Ainsborough. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the last week, 3 people have been arrested in Germany on suspicion of spying for China. Of course, 2 have been charged in the UK. This comes on back of the Intelligence and Security Committee report, which concluded that the government has no strategy or whole government approach for dealing with this serious threat. When is the Minister going to get a grip of this serious situation, a serious threat from China to our democracy?
Well, I totally disagree with the Honourable Gentleman's characterisation. We explicitly dealt with this both in the integrated review and the integrated review refresh. It sets out a coordinated approach and is very clear about the threats we face from hostile states, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and indeed China, which we're very clear about the threats it represents both to our economic security and our democratic institutions. And that's why we've taken a range of actions, including for the first time directly attributing attacks to China and imposing sanctions in respect of them.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. Well, with local and national elections on the horizon, it's absolutely vital that voters can have full confidence in the integrity of our electoral system. So with that in mind, what assessment has his department made of the risks posed by deep fakes and misinformation on the upcoming elections?
Well, I do have considerable concerns about deep fakes in respect of the upcoming election. I think we've seen in previous elections hack and leak being used as a tactic by hostile states. We have to take into account both the capability of deep fakes, particularly enhanced by artificial intelligence. That's why we are developing our strategy through the Defending Democracy Task Force, and we are undertaking exercises right now to enhance our capabilities. What I would say, though, is I think this is a challenge for all citizens to appreciate that we should not necessarily take images to be true when we first see them because of the enhanced capability of adversaries.
Sarah Atherton.
Question 5, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, excellent. So, the OVA has provided £445,000 for research into the lived experiences of women veterans and for development of further support. With invaluable contributions from my honourable friend, the member for Wrexham, we are developing the government's first women's strategy, which will celebrate the successes of women veterans, but will also look at specific challenges they may face in order to better address their needs.
Sarah Atherton.
Speaker, I'm one of the estimated 250,000 female veterans, and I've spent the last 4 years raising awareness of this hidden community. I've been pleased to work with the Minister towards establishing the first female veterans strategy. I've been chair of the advisory board. The evidence gathering has ended. The recommendations have been made. So could the Minister let me know whether the term military sexual trauma, female military sexual trauma, will be acknowledged and included, and what date the strategy will be published? Thank you.
So, Mr. Speaker, I really want to pay tribute to my honourable friend, who's been a passionate advocate for this. She's the first woman from the ranks to come to this place, and she should be incredibly proud of all the work she's done over many years on this issue. I recognise the unique challenges around sexual trauma in the military. Of course I do. I've said that before from this dispatch box. The strategy will be published before summer recess. I know she's waiting for it. I'm determined to get it out before summer recess, and I'm hopeful that it will meet all of the demands and the unmet hurt in that community that has been unmet for too long.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've had the pleasure of meeting with many female veterans in my own constituency in Cardiff South and Penarth, and of working with fantastic organisations like Woody's Lodge, the Royal British Legion, and of course the Welsh Veterans Partnership. Can the Minister say what he's doing to work with the Welsh Government and local authorities, indeed across the whole of the UK, to ensure that women veterans get the support that is rightly being asked for?
Yeah, of course. So on a regular basis, we meet with the devolved authorities to make sure that all of our strategies are in sync. Obviously, a lot of these policy areas, whether it's around health, housing, education, devolved. But look, we're clear, both nationally and internationally, we want to set the standard within the Office of Veterans Affairs. We've got great relationships internationally now in terms of setting the pace on that. But I want to make sure that's concomitant with what we're doing in the involved authorities, and certainly we have regular meetings with the Welsh local government and the Scottish, and indeed we're going over to Northern Ireland again in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister... question 6.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I would like to answer questions 6 and 10 together, but it looks like 10 is not out of bed. A process of validation is carried out to assess the strength and credibility of each nomination. We protect the integrity of the honours system by carrying out probity checks with a number of government departments before names are submitted to the Prime Minister and His Majesty the King for approval.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister previously backed calls for Horizon victim and campaigner Alan Bates to receive an honour, yet his name was absent from the Prime Minister's surprise honours list last month. However, Russia-linked Mohammed Mansour's name was on that list. So what was it about the multi-millionaire, generous Conservative Party donor that attracted the Prime Minister to the idea of giving him a knighthood?
The gentleman whose name has just been mentioned is a very successful business and a philanthropist. And I'm sure that those qualities were very much in the mind of the Prime Minister when he was put forward for an honour. There were also some extremely distinguished names from the world of artificial intelligence and the creative industries who were recognised for their contribution to our country. The honourable gentleman for a sedentary position says 1. I advise him to go back and check the list because, not for the first time in this House, he is wrong.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Recently, the Prime Minister announced an extraordinary round of honours, which many described as lacking integrity and bringing the system into disrepute. It included a donor who had donated to the Conservative Party £5 million and 4 Conservative MPs loyal to the PM. So, Minister, in the run-up to a general election, which he is widely tipped to lose, what could possibly be the justification for the Prime Minister announcing and recommending a round of honours outside of the conventional, traditional King's birthday list?
I thank the honourable...
Order. Can I just say, it will be easier if you're here for the beginning of the question, and then to stretch the question is testing the front bench and my patience on the subject, Minister.
No, I thank the honourable gentleman for turning up, and I refer him to the answer I gave a few moments ago.
Emma Lilbert.
7, please, Mr. Speaker.
The government has successfully reduced inflation by more than half, making the cost of living more affordable for veterans, along with every other resident in the UK. Veterans' employment is at an all-time high, 89% within 6 months of leaving service. And our recently launched Our Prosper Employment Pathway will help veterans and their families secure well-paying jobs in key sectors.
Emma Lilbert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Here's some facts. Veteran homelessness has rose by 14% over the last year. 17% of veterans and their families are living in food-insecure households. Over 80,000 are having to claim universal credit just to get by. Despite his claims of making the UK the best place in the world to be a veteran, it isn't, is it?
So I think the idea that you can say, here's some facts, and then read out a load of things that are not correct, doesn't really change the facts of those situations, right? This Christmas, last Christmas, there was not a single veteran sleeping rough because of a lack of provision, because of a programme designed by this government. This morning, the Shadow Veterans Minister hasn't even turned up to answer questions. So I'm not going to take any lessons whatsoever from Labour on veterans. Veterans are deeply nervous going into this election as to what the offer might be from the party opposite, and again, it's banal quotes about statistics that are not correct. This is not a game. These are serious people who deserve the nation's respect, and I encourage the party opposite to align with that.
Gerald Jones.
Question number 11, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In January, I appointed an expert group to provide technical advice on the inquiry's recommendations on compensation. The Government will provide an update on next steps regarding the recommendations on compensation as soon as possible following the publication of the final report on the 20th of May.
Gerald Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Justice is long overdue on this issue. One of my constituents affected by this issue told me what they'd been through, including a liver transplant, many antiviral regimes, ongoing health impacts, and dealing with the fact that many peers, the children they spent time with growing up, are no longer with us. There is simply no financial or political price high enough to cover the stress and the impact on mental well-being. This House has shown its will on this issue, so why are we waiting? And importantly, when will people start to receive the compensation, given that on average one person dies every 4 days as a result of this scandal?
Well, the honourable gentleman makes absolutely the right points. I agree with his urgency, the call for urgency. As I sat in my response to the UQ a few days ago, this is my absolute priority to deliver this as quickly as possible. The legislation to set up the Infected Blood Compensation Authority is in the other place. It will be debated next Tuesday. We have announced on the 17th of April what we're doing with respect to interim payments to the estates of the deceased infected. But further work is going on. I am engaging with the community over the first 10 days of May, before the 20th when the report is published. But his representation in terms of urgency is heard by me, and I'm working on it as quickly as I can.
Secretary Nick Thomas-Symonds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment that was led by my right honourable friend for Kingston upon Hull North, passed by this House at the end of last year, was to set up a compensation scheme within a strict time limit of 3 months. Now, that time limit must remain on the face of the bill, and victims need concrete action. So can the Paymaster General tell us when the Treasury will set out its detailed costings for this scheme? And secondly, and most importantly, when can victims expect their final compensation payments? Well, the costings will be the responsibility of the Treasury, but there is a joint team between the Cabinet Office and the Treasury working to give advice to the Prime Minister so that we can make decisions in a timely way as soon as possible on the 20th of May. I'm just conscious that across all the different communities of infected and affected, as much clarity is needed as possible. They have had to wait too long, and so I'm making sure that as far as we possibly can, when those final decisions are made, there will not only be a headline decision, but there will be clarity on process thereafter. It's those details that I'm working on now, and I hope a decision can be made as soon as possible from the 20th of May.
SNP spokesperson, Christy Black.
Mr. Speaker, having a child with a rare condition who continues to get sicker despite treatment is every parent's worst nightmare. Recent revelations that children as young as 3 were immorally used as guinea pigs and given infected blood are truly horrific. Without payouts of compensation, how can any parent have faith that the UK government will ensure accountability and that they will take real responsibility for this scandal?
Well, the Honourable Lady makes a very powerful point, and she refers to what has come out in the press in the last few weeks. And on the 20th of May, I'm anticipating that Sir Brian Langstaff's final report will reveal in, I imagine, harrowing detail the allegations and the detail of what happened a long time ago, but the consequences, which has been absolutely profound and life-changing for so many people in this country. I listened to her and the advice she gave me after last oral questions. I will be visiting Scotland and working with the DAs to make sure that we have a United Kingdom approach as well.
Question number 12, Mr. Speaker.
The government continues to take unprecedented action to support those who served us through what fortitude we're ending veterans off sleeping, or restore and courage of supporting their health and well-being, or prosper an employment pathway to help veterans secure high-value jobs. We're also planning to publish UK's first draft veterans bill, representing another step forward in our journey to make this the best country in the world to be a veteran.
Sarah Dye.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Wincanton Armed Forces Breakfast Club, held at the Balsam Centre in my constituency, offers veterans with a place to catch up, with peer support, and where they can enjoy a social and hearty breakfast. What efforts is the Minister taking to support community-focused initiatives such as this for veterans across the UK?
So I pay tribute to the Wincanton Armed Forces Breakfast Club. Like many breakfast clubs, including my own constituency, they do an amazing job of bringing together veterans and tackling isolation and loneliness, particularly among the older generation of veterans. I encourage all members of the House to go to those. And I really pay tribute to the volunteers and those who turn up and administrate them every week. They don't just happen, but they actually get in there. They don't just talk a good game on veterans. They get in there, they volunteer, they spend their time, and they really care. And I pay tribute to all of them today.
Dr. Neil Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is Anzac Day, where we remember Australians and New Zealanders who gave so much. In an increasingly dangerous world, will my right honourable friend join me in paying tribute to veterans in Australia, New Zealand, here in the UK and right across the Commonwealth, to whom we owe so much?
I thank my honourable friend for raising this question, and today is a very important day. Anzac Day is an incredibly important day. I was in Australia only a few months ago, and we're only as strong as our relationships with our allies, and they have made an extraordinary contribution to world peace, particularly during the world wars. I pay tribute to veterans across the globe. It is not easy fighting these wars, particularly wars of choice now that are not global conflicts, and then coming back and reintegrating society. They can be incredibly proud of their service, and people like me and my counterparts in Australia and elsewhere will continue to strive night and day to improve their lot in civil society when they return.
Just to say, I will be laying a wreath on behalf of the House. Chiamora.
Number 13, Mr. Speaker.
The Government recognises how vital digital products and services are for delivering public services. The Digital Data and Technology Playbook provides best practice guidance for the procurement of digital products and services. The Playbook is updated annually, most recently in June 2023. Departments are responsible for ensuring that public services delivered by the private sector represent value for money.
Yes, Chiamora.
Digital services procurement should be a win-win-win. The British public get better services, businesses get a good, reliable customer, and public services are reduced in cost. But under this government, that's not the case. Departments are locked in to single-source providers. We have dependence on legacy systems, and the NAO itself, National Audit Office, said the procurement was not competitive enough. So as an example of that, can he say how competitive cloud service provision is across his government, and will he also set out how he is using open source to boost competitiveness in digital services procurement?
We have, Madam Deputy Speaker, a highly successful commercial functioning government, which is driving up value for money across all of our commercial arrangements. And the sort of steps that they take, so the Honourable Lady is aware, the sort of steps they take are to monitor contracts, both before, during and after they've been in place, to ensure that we reduce the chances of issues like lock-in. And I strongly advise her to go and read the commercial, I'm sure she hasn't, the commercial function documentation that comes out of the Cabinet Office, because she will see, as has been shown successively, that it saves billions of pounds for the British taxpayer.
Thank you. We now move to topical questions. Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much. Question number 1, please.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Cabinet Office continues to play a central coordinating role in protecting our national and economic security. Last week, we published the response to the call for evidence on the National Security and Investment Act, and I set out the steps we will take to fine-tune that system, including honing our approach to export controls, outward investment, and providing more support to business. Later, I will be convening a roundtable of university vice-chancellors to brief them on the security risks in research and academia and to discuss how we address those. All of this complements our plan for a generational £75 billion uplift in defence spending, including a new National Defence and Resilience Plan, setting out a cross-government approach to security, preparedness and resilience as a nation.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's often claimed by critics that the continual stream of ineffective and incompetent legislation we see from Holyrood is evidence of the need for a second democratically elected chamber to scrutinise properly. We have such an effective chamber here. However, this week we've seen how important it can be in legislation. Would its position not have been strengthened by being a democratically elected second revising chamber? And would the Secretary of State not agree that the time has come when we need to look again at how we reform the House of Lords and make it more relevant to the 21st century and more democratic?
No, I'm afraid I completely disagree with the Honourable Lady about having an elected second chamber. This is the democratic chamber for our nation. It is the principal voice of the nation. We don't need a second chamber in conflict with this one, further burdening and complexing legislative processes.
Dr. Neil Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The very welcome Windsor Framework demonstrates a strong commitment to human and animal health with its extension to access to veterinary medicines in Northern Ireland 2025. I welcome the Cabinet Office and Northern Ireland Minister establishing the Cabinet Office Veterinary Medicines Working Group, and I'm pleased to be part of this group working hard to find a solution. But can my right honourable friend reassure the House that the Government will continue to strain every sinew in discussions with the EU to protect both animal health and public health in Northern Ireland and right across the UK, with a permanent solution for access to veterinary medicines in Northern Ireland?
Yes, Madam Deputy Speaker, I can so assure him. I'm very grateful to him for bringing his professional expertise to bear within the working group. We've met twice. We intend to report at the end of June. We will then have a consistent and coherent position with which we can go forward to blend a combination of adaptation and, I hope, productive negotiations with the EU to deliver a long-lasting permanent solution to safeguard both animal and human health on the island of Ireland. I'm determined we should do that in a coherent and professional manner, and I look forward to working with him to do it.
Shadow Minister Pat McFadden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And may I begin with a moment of unity, because the Deputy Prime Minister and I are both pushing for an early general election as soon as possible. And I very much welcome his recognition that there's absolutely no point in this Conservative government carrying on in office a moment longer. Now, further to the question a little earlier by my honourable friend, the member for Weaver Vale, this week 2 people were charged in this country under the Official Secrets Act with spying for China, one of whom worked for politicians in this House.
Order. I have to stop the honourable gentleman. It seems to me that he's about to go down a road of a matter which is sub judice, and it cannot be discussed here in this chamber. The Speaker made a statement at the beginning of business earlier this week asking members to be very careful about, not indeed just to be very careful, but simply not to refer to this matter, because it is sub judice. Can the honourable gentleman ask his general question in a different way and not refer to that specific issue?
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I will ask a policy question. Thank you for your guidance. The Government recently awarded a contract for a supercomputer to Lenovo, a China-headquartered firm that has been the subject of enforcement action by the United States on security grounds. Now, this supercomputer will be used by critical government bodies like the UK Atomic Energy Authority. how will ministers safeguard the public against any possible misuse of sensitive government data as a result of the awarding of the contract?
Well, I thank the right honourable gentleman for his question, and I know that he's also written to me regarding this topic, and I can assure him that we will be working with the National Cybersecurity Centre and the National Security Secretariat to make sure that full checks and measures are put in place to make sure that such abuse shouldn't occur. He referred to his role as being the general election coordinator for the Labour Party. I understand he sits on the Quad, which determines Labour policy. So perhaps he could clear up, for the benefit of us all, on the issue of national security. Does the Labour Party support or not our £75 billion increase in defence spending? Because if he cares about these things, the party opposite should say plainly, yes, they do.
Come on, Pat, answer.
Madam Deputy Speaker, when we announce a policy, we make sure it's properly costed and funded, which I recommend to the Deputy Prime Minister. Now, one of the other cyber threats that modern states are facing is pre-positioning, the planting of destructive software in critical infrastructure, which can then be activated at a later date. The director of the FBI has said that pre-positioning of the Volt Typhoon type discovered in American infrastructure was, and I quote, the defining threat of our generation. And America's Cyber Defense Agency said that Five Eyes allies were also likely to have been targeted. So can I ask the Deputy Prime Minister, has the government looked for or found Volt Typhoon type infiltration of any parts of our critical national IT infrastructure, and if so, what action has been taken to remove it?
Well, first of all, the right honourable gentleman has been around this place long enough to know that he's delivering a non-answer on their support for defence spending. I think the whole House will have noted that. However, he does raise a very important issue in respect of pre-positioning, and he will appreciate there are limits to what I can say from the dispatch box, given that some of this relates to higher side intelligence. But I can assure him that we are working with our Five Eyes allies, and in particular the United States, since the US and the UK have exceptional capability in these areas, to make sure we both have adequate knowledge and understanding of such pre-positioning and take effective steps in respect of it.
Sir Christopher Chu.
Deputy Speaker, 8 weeks ago, on the 29th of February, at First Order Questions, I asked the Minister without portfolio what was going to be done by the government to assist those people who are adversely affected by the statute of limitations as a result of having been injured by COVID-19 vaccines. And my right honourable friend said in response that she had taken the issue to the Permanent Secretary to see what we can do. And I wondered if she could update us on what has happened with the Permanent Secretary over the last 8 weeks.
I want to thank my honourable friend for asking this question. He's a tireless campaign on this matter. I know he's met with myself. I know he's met with the Secretary of State for Health. As I said to him, I'm dealing with this matter with the Permanent Secretary. He will know we've got a new Permanent Secretary in the department, and we are working at pace to resolve this.
SNP spokesperson Kirsty Black.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the UK Government last year promised to relocate hundreds of civil service posts to the north east of Scotland. It has now been confirmed that the total number will be 35. Given the billions generated in energy revenues and the unparalleled potential of our area in powering our green future, can a minister please explain to the people of the north east of Scotland how hundreds and 35 are now the same thing?
I think she is referring to the second headquarters of DESNES in Aberdeen, which I visited just before Christmas. I think there was a misunderstanding about the numbers that were quoted in the paper. What I can tell her, what I can tell the Honourable Lady, is that we have had 18,283 jobs moved out of London, consequential of the places for growth. I will examine the matter of what numbers into Scotland, and I will write to her to clarify the government's position.
Kerry McCarthy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I recently met with Emma Howard-Boyd, who is to discuss the interim findings of the Mayor of London's Climate Resilience Review that she's been leading on. It involves the work of many different government departments at a national level, and I wondered if the Minister could update us on whether we're conducting a similar exercise. It's looking at the impact of what would happen if we see a similar heat wave to what we saw a couple of years ago, flash flooding, all sorts of things. It's not just the responsibility of DESNES or of DEFRA. It covers many departments, so it's a Cabinet Office responsibility.
Yes, it's an important question. We're doing exactly that. And indeed, extreme heat is something we have to increasingly plan against, and that's why we have, for the first time last year, introduced an alert system for extreme heat, which matches the alert system for extreme cold. What I would say, though, I do disagree with the Mayor of London that the way to deal with this is to start imposing 20-mile-an-hour speed limits everywhere and imposing a ULEZ zone. I hope the people of London will have their opportunity to vote against that next week.
Sarah Atherton.
Madam Deputy Speaker, earlier we heard a number of statements from opposite questioning ministerial integrity. But perhaps the opposition should look closer to home. To be precise, the First Minister of Wales and his links with donations to his leadership campaign and the Development Bank of Wales. So, Minister, can you tell us when will the Labour Party, the Welsh Labour Party, apply to themselves the standards they've called for in the Chamber this morning?
Order. If you all shout, I can't hear what the Honourable Lady's saying, I think there is some doubt. The Honourable Lady can't ask the Minister a question about what the Labour Party will do. Would she like to just rephrase what she's saying?
With reference to the links for the First Minister of Wales, his donations to his campaign and the Development Bank of Wales, would the Minister like to describe why this is such an issue to the people of Wales when the opposition keeps shouting that we are doing the wrong thing?
I think the Honourable Lady makes a very strong point. If a devolved administration receives a donation as part of a political campaign, if the leader of that administration receives a £200,000 donation at the same time that the Development Bank of Wales made a £400,000 loan to a subsidiary of that company, it is surely a matter of public interest, and it will be for the First Minister of Wales to determine what is appropriate. But I would have thought some explanation would be the very least that the people of Wales would expect.
Wendy Chamberlain.
Madam Deputy Speaker, last year the Government pledged to introduce a ministerial deed to legally commit ministers to keeping the after-government business appointment rules. Now, if I were cynical, Madam Deputy Speaker, I could think of a reason why the Government has not brought that commitment forward. But might the Minister give us an idea of when he intends to do so?
The Honourable Lady is absolutely right. In July, in response to those three reports, the Committee of Standards in Public Life, the Boardman work and PACAC reports, the Government did say that it will be working up strengthening rules on business appointments and developing that ministerial deed. I can't give an update at this point. It's work that the Deputy Prime Minister and his team are leading on, but it is important work and we do need to get it right.
Dame Diana Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I first of all thank the Paymaster General for all his hard work on the contaminated blood scandal. And as Madam Deputy Speaker you would expect, I will still urge the Minister to go further, faster and quicker to get this resolved. If the Infected Blood Compensation Authority is to be established upon royal assent, can the Minister just outline the timescale and the process for the appointment of the Chair and the other directors, and how will those with lived experience be involved and included amongst the directors?
I thank the Right Honourable Lady for her kind words and her constructive approach, and it's absolutely right that she continues to press me, which she does at every opportunity. I think reflecting on our conversations and what she said to me, the key thing is to ensure that we maintain and reclaim the trust of the infected blood community in all its dimensions. She'll know that I'm engaging with them in depth over several meetings over the 1st to the 10th of May. Brian Langstaff made clear that the infected blood community and all those accessing the scheme should have a role to play in its delivery. So I'll be thinking about, consequential of listening to what they say to me, how we build that into. As she knows, the government has made provision for committees and subcommittees to ensure there's representation of the communities, whilst also maintaining an arm's length body and an independence to that body. So I need to reconcile those, but I can't give her a timetable, I'm sorry, but I am working on it in some detail.
Nick Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I press the Deputy Prime Minister? Foreign Office officials have refused to say whether Lord Cameron has recused himself from part of his role as the Foreign Secretary, given his previous well-paid work in promoting the China-backed port city Colombo. So, can the Minister tell the House whether the Foreign Secretary has recused himself from any part of his ministerial duties?
Well, as the Honourable Gentleman will know, the Foreign Secretary, upon taking office, indeed shortly before taking office, had all his interests properly reviewed, both by the Propriety and Ethics team in my department, but also went through them with the Independent Advisor on Ministerial Interests. The Independent Advisor on Ministerial Interests set out all relevant interests, and those have been published, so the information is transparently out there for people to be able to judge by them for themselves.
George Galloway.
Madam Deputy Speaker, ever since the monster Cyril Smith, formerly of this House, but initially the Mayor of Rochdale, the town has been blighted by scandals of grooming and cover-up. We currently have 64 men in the town on bail on grooming charges. The previous Labour Mayor of Rochdale and the next Mayor of Rochdale, King's representative, were both investigated on charges of sexual malpractice towards young girls in their employ, with all the power imbalances that implies. Self-regulation, no investigation by any outside party. How can this be right? What will the Minister do to help me clean up Rochdale?
Well, of course, as the Honourable Gentleman will know, any criminal allegations are properly a matter for the courts, and you wouldn't expect a Minister to comment on them from this dispatch box. In respect of the further allegations he makes, if he writes to me in respect to those, I'm very happy to take them up myself or with ministerial colleagues.
Dan Jarvis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I ask what consideration has been given to the merits of making it illegal for public sector bodies to pay ransoms if they are the victim of a ransomware attack?
I think it's a good question, one that the government continues to keep open and under review. The argument against doing that is it could discourage companies that are subject to ransomware attacks from reporting those, for example, to the National Cybersecurity Centre. Those reportings help us gather intelligence on the nature of those threats and help work with them to resolve them. It's not something I totally rule out, but that's the reason why we haven't imposed it so far.
Gregory Campbell.
And Deputy Speaker, the Veterans Minister will know that many councils in Northern Ireland have appointed veterans champions. Will he join with me in acknowledging the work that many of them do, and also calling upon the wide range of political parties that are on councils in Northern Ireland to offer their unstinting support to those veterans champions to help deliver services to veterans?
Yes, of course. And in Northern Ireland, we've made extraordinary progress on Veterans Affairs. I recognise and have always recognised the unique difficulties of that. But the veterans' services and making sure these people are looked after because of their service should not be at the whim of different political parties. I am working at pace to establish an outpost of the Office of Veterans Affairs in Northern Ireland so that we can create an environment where everyone can work together, pull together all of the different services and get veterans care in Northern Ireland up to the same level that it is in England. And I look forward to working with my honourable friend and other elected representatives out there from all parties to make sure that we do the right thing.
Rupa.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With two former Conservative PMs having contravened both the Ministerial Code recently, twice in the case of Boris Johnson, and the Radcliffe rules in the case of his successor, is it now Tory party policy to routinely ignore the rules? And if not, what sanctions will these two face?
Well, the Honourable Lady is correct to say that the former Prime Minister, the member for South West Norfolk book was reviewed under the Radcliffe rules. The Cabinet Office did not clear it. The overwhelming majority of those books that are submitted do comply, and we will have to keep these matters under review.
Sir Chris Bryant.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a very simple question to the Deputy Prime Minister. Does the Foreign Secretary stand recused in any aspect of his job by virtue of his financial interests, either now or before he was appointed to his post? Yes or no?
Well, the party opposite keep on pushing on this point, on the same point, but I refer the right honourable gentleman to the latest list of ministerial interests published in December. It includes those of the Foreign Secretary and provides details of ministers' interests that are judged by the independent adviser to be relevant or could be perceived to be relevant to their ministerial roles. All of it is there in the public domain.
Patrick Brady.
With reference to the written questions that the Parliamentary Secretary to the Cabinet Office answered, what does the government, can you outline what the government considers to be the difference between a foreign court and an international court?
We've answered this question on a number of occasions, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister told my honourable friend, the member for Kingston upon Hull North, that he could not give a timeline with regard to the infected blood scandal compensation. This is a subject which is raised on an almost daily basis in this House by members on all sides, because our constituents just cannot understand why it is taking so long. Can he at least give an indication of when he thinks that compensation might begin to be paid? It's especially important given that, as I understand it, one victim of the scandal dies every 4 days.
The answer to this is to be found when we issue the comprehensive response to the inquiry as soon as possible after the 20th of May. Legislation is going through the other place to make good on the amendment that was passed in this House by virtue of the advocacy of the Right Honourable Lady and leadership of the Right Honourable Lady. What we've announced is that we will make some interim payments to the estates of those deceased infected who have not yet received any money, but the substantive response, translating 18 recommendations into meaningful, actionable responses for a wide community over 40 or 50 years, obviously demands a lot of work to quantify and get the process right, and we will update the House as quickly as possible after the 20th of May.
Question time.
Gerald Jones.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Just now, the Deputy Prime Minister raised the issue of the £75 billion public spending announcement. So, would he care to tell the House that why, after 14 years in power, it takes an upcoming general election for him to and his party to make defence spending promises?
Well, it may have escaped the honourable gentleman's attention. Russia has invaded Ukraine. Iran's proxies are attacking our allies in the Middle East. That demands a response from this government. It has been provided by the Prime Minister, and it's very notable that the party opposite is failing to match that commitment.
Alison Thewlis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Papers at an employment tribunal last week reported that Rhondda Amar, a former civil servant, has stated that racism within the Cabinet Office appeared to be unrelenting and systemic. And despite having a role as head of policy at the government's illegal migration task force, she was made unwelcome at meetings regarding the Rwanda plan due to her views on the racist ultra-hostility of the policies. So can I ask the Minister, is Ms Amar right that speaking up against racism in the Cabinet Office is a career death sentence?
I don't accept that at all. And of course, she withdrew her allegations completely on the eve of having them scrutinised at the higher tribunal. So I don't accept that. And it's absolutely right that senior civil servants take action when there are performance issues with staff under them without fear of allegations being made against them.
Christian Wakeford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Further to my right honourable friend's question on the infected blood scandal, over 3 years ago, the Cumberledge report also highlighted the need for redress for victims of sodium valproate, of vaginal mesh and the Primados scandals. Can you highlight what progress has been made in regards to redress for these victims as well, please?
I'm sorry, I'm not able to give an answer on those other scandals. I think there was a debate, a backbench business debate last Thursday that my honourable friend, the Minister, replied to. I believe work is ongoing, but I will have to write to him to give him a thorough answer on that matter.
Thank you. Sir, point of order. Mr. Galloway.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that standards may have changed since I was last here. But in answer to the question asked by the honourable gentleman, the Minister rose to the dispatch box and said, "We have answered that question on numerous previous occasions." Can that possibly be a legitimate ministerial answer? After all, that could be the answer to virtually every question that is ever asked in this House.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his point of order, and I can't help agreeing with that final point that he made there, having sat here for thousands of hours and heard the same question answered again and again. But the honourable gentleman makes a very good point that ministers are responsible and have a duty to answer the question again and again. But if the minister thought today or at any other time that the appropriate answer in particular circumstances was the one that the honourable gentleman has just quoted, then that is not a matter on which I can either criticise or take action. What ministers say at the dispatch box, Mr. Speaker has said many times, and I'm very pleased to repeat, is not a matter for the chair. Thank you. And the honourable gentleman's point of order has brought us very perfectly to just after 10:30, and we can therefore proceed to the... I will just pause for a moment to allow the change of dramatis personae.